Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. Make sure you smash that like button down below and hit the subscribe button if you are new. As you guys know, we got that negative 93% impression advantage rate, so make sure you interact with this video in any way possible to help it in the algorithm so we can continue to grow our audience here. So as you guys know, we had that tragedy a few days ago that took place in the King Soopers in Colorado. And you had this individual go into a King Soopers, which is essentially a Kroger, it's a grocery store, and he shot up the store and killed 10 individuals. Now, initially, a lot of people in the media jumped to blame white men and right-wingers, despite the fact that they didn't have any idea what actually motivated the crime. But now we find out that the Boulder mass shooter was actually Syrian. His name was Ahmad al-Issa, not Alyssa, Elisa. Now, the reason why they're calling it Alyssa, it's pretty obvious, because I've seen this throughout several reporting. They're whitening his name specifically. It's the reverse equivalent if the shooter's last name was Abbott, and then people tried to make him seem like he was Muslim and instead called him Abood. It's ridiculous. They don't get the facts straight. They purposely twist them to fit the narrative in the media, which is explicitly at this point an anti-white narrative and nothing else. I don't care if it's politically incorrect to say, because it's absolutely true. Now, not only was this individual not a white man, he was also not really a right-winger either. In fact, he was a left-winger. He trashed Trump on his Facebook page consistently. He posted about why refugees and immigrants are good for America with this terrible article from the PBS talking about how immigrants help the economy because it boosts the GDP or whatever. He was definitely not by any means a right-winger. And while we do not know a motive, you guys can piece together what the probable motive of this attack really was. But that didn't prevent the media explicitly from blaming white people and then walking it back when they actually found out what happened. This individual, this very stupid person right here, says the shooter was taken into custody. In other words, it was almost certainly a white man again. So blaming white people. Here we go. They say if he were black or brown, he would be dead. Because again, you have this myth perpetrated by the media that if a shooter happens to be a minority, that the cops take him out dead or something. There's really no data that I've seen that explicitly backs that up, but they like to cherry pick certain instances that have taken place over the years and try to piece together a narrative here. Then this same very stupid individual says, let's mourn the victims but not glorify the killer, with the intention of having his name widely known. So they draw first blood on the racial attack against whites when they find out it's a non-white individual. No, you can't say the name of the killer. It doesn't really have to do with glorification to just admit basic facts about the case, especially when you make presumptions beforehand that were just completely untrue. And we saw this all throughout. This loser right here says, I'll bet anyone my salary right now the shooter in Boulder is a right-wing MAGA white male. No, no, and no. 0 for 3. That's a failing grade right there. That is completely false, was not the case. And as you see, he tried to walk it back by saying that most shootings in the United States between 1982 and 2021 happen to be white males, because most time it's a safe bet that they are. That's what he says. And this is not explicitly true. It is very misleading data. If you look at the actual data and break it down proportionally, this study by Statista had 121, I believe, mass shootings. Whites were 55% of the perpetrators. Blacks were 17%. Latinos were 8%. Asians were 7%. Other, which mostly was Middle Eastern, was 12%. And natives were 2%. So whites are underrepresented, especially given the fact that back in 1982, they represented a much higher proportion of the population than they represent today. And also because they still represent 60% of the population, they are underrepresented. Middle Easterns are the most overrepresented. Blacks are overrepresented. Asians are overrepresented. Latinos are really the only group besides whites that are underrepresented here. And it doesn't even include gang shootings. If you have a gang shooting of 4 or more people, it doesn't even include that in this list because those happen every day. Those are largely perpetrated by Black Americans and Latino Americans. That would really change the data here. But all it shows is it perpetrates an anti-white narrative that the media uses to divide America for their own profit. You could look at the actual facts here. You saw what happened in Atlanta. You saw a white guy go and shoot up 3 massage parlors. It killed 6 Asian people and 2 white people. All they said was Asian lives matter, Asian lives matter. Not just ignoring the white victims, but also trying to make it a racial narrative. But the shooting didn't really have anything to do with race. It had more to do with the fact that this guy had a sex addiction and he was targeting massage parlors, presumably massage parlors where bad things happen per se. So what we do know is that there were 10 dead white victims for the Boulder mass shooting. Nobody cares about that. Nobody is saying white lives matter. And they'll say, oh, but it's white people have the money and power. Okay, well, Asians have more money on average than whites are more successful. They still said Asian lives matter. So it's clearly not about that when they say Black lives matter, Latino lives matter, Asian lives matter. Kind of sounds like all lives matter, except one specific race of people consistently gets omitted from that. And I really wonder why that is, really. I wonder why that is. And now that they can't blame race, what are they doing? They're blaming guns. We saw Joe Biden today come out with this nonsensical statement. Actually, it was yesterday, but that's beside the point. Biden says, we can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Again, going after the AR-15. This is the problem. 85% of all murders in the United States involving guns are committed by handguns. In fact, the AR-15 is not an assault weapon. Just because it looks scary doesn't mean it's an assault weapon. You see other forms of rifles that look like ancient muskets that pose the same amount of danger in reality. So in terms of the AR-15 that was used, it's not an assault weapon. It's a lightweight semi-auto. And also, baseball bats and hammers kill more people each year than rifles do, than AR-15s do. And you can look at this right here. Rifles are roughly 3 to 4% of all firearm deaths. The AR-15 is a much lower percentage of that 3 to 4% as well. So blaming it on the AR-15 is also ridiculous because, again, these people, you take the AR-15 away, okay, they'll just get a pistol and then they'll put a bump stock on it. Oh, but bump stocks are banned. Doesn't matter. You could use a rubber band as a bump stock if you know how to coordinate it properly. You can 3D print a bump stock. It's illegal, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. So Biden is also saying that he wants to close loopholes in our gun background check system. That's code word for largely create a national gun registry. That was one of the bills that was being passed through the House before the mass shooting even took place. So what could possibly go wrong with a national gun registry? You look at this social credit score system that we already have in America with our social media. They're able to label all right-wingers as terrorists and remove certain people from social media for having views that they deem to be a little bit too controversial, and then that window of what's actually controversial increases, and it's going to get all of us at some point. So the bottom line is that this is going to be misused significantly. It's probably not going to solve any of the problems whatsoever in regards to gun violence or mass shooting. And it's important we look at this in terms of looking at the mass shootings in America. They say it's an American problem. It's an anti-American narrative. But studies actually show that despite making up 4.5% of the population, the U.S. makes up less than 1.15% of the mass public shooters, less than 1.5% of their murders, and just 2.2% of their attacks. So attacks in the U.S. are not only less frequent than other countries, but they're also much less deadly on average. Keep that in mind. Largely an anti-American narrative that's being promoted to push the global gun control narrative to take away your guns because that's what they do for control purposes. In terms of the whole narrative about gun control and gun violence in America, they always like to point to the fact that America has a higher crime rate than places like Canada when it comes to guns, but you can look at this here. This is the gun control map, by the way. America is considered to be a less restrictive country when it comes to gun control. and many other countries. In fact, most countries are very restrictive. So it is true that a lot of European countries and Canada are considered to be more restrictive when it comes to guns. However, the countries with the highest murder rates like El Salvador, Guatemala, Venezuela, a lot of Central American countries, as well as some countries in Africa, these countries specifically have a lot more restrictive gun laws than the United States of America does. However, the U.S. has more gun crime for other reasons, mainly cultural reasons that they don't want to touch. Obviously, Canada, there's not a whole lot of murder that happens in the country of Canada. They're too busy apologizing for everything, drinking maple syrup, hunting moose. That's what they do up there. It's a cultural thing, obviously. And the left likes to point to the Australian buyback as an excuse for why we should do it here and buy back assault weapons and buy back rifles and even handguns in many instances. The problem with that is, even though there was a crime drop after the Australia buyback, you also saw a very similar crime drop in New Zealand, where you did not have a buyback instituted, because that's the whole crime drop of the 90s. They like to say gun control actually does lower crime. Look at the 90s. But crime really dropped everywhere, places that had gun control, places that didn't have gun control. There's so many reasons why that potentially happened, why crime dropped across the world in the 1990s. But gun control is not really one of them whatsoever. In terms of the top countries in the world for murder, like I said, El Salvador, Honduras, Venezuela, Jamaica, and Belize. Of all of these countries, I think Honduras is the only one that specifically has less restrictive gun control. So again, not a gun problem, a culture problem. You have to solve the culture problem. And in terms of the motive of this attack, we will have to wait and see. There are unconfirmed reports that the shooter had sympathies for ISIS in Syria. So if that is the case, it just proves Donald Trump right again that a travel ban can prevent some terrorism. Not all terrorism, because you do have domestic terrorism. You have a lot of domestic mass shooting. But in terms of the attackers, the Middle East is largely overrepresented in them. So it is largely a cultural problem as well. And it is something that does need to be dealt with either way. And in terms of domestic mass shootings, how do we stop those? Well, there are many problems that we have here. You talk about the state of our culture. You talk about the pharmaceutical industry. You talk about a lack of parenting. We have a lot of problems, but you can't blame guns for it whatsoever, because guns are not the problem. You can't blame AR-15s. You can't falsely label them as assault weapons when they are not. AR does not stand for assault rifle. AR stands for Armalite rifle. They don't want to mention this, but it is entirely true. So that's really my take on all this. Please comment your take down below. But as always, guys, thank you for watching this video. Smash that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media, especially Alt Tech. The links are all in the description below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.